All right, first thing that I want to talk about, we talked about, building blocks of harmony and chordal structures. So you've got a pretty good understanding of that. The second thing I want to say is I've got 54 chords that I mapped out while I was studying music theory that I figured I was going to use all the time, which didn't exactly work out that way. But, I put them together and studied it pretty well. We are not going to get that in depth. We're going to talk about basic harmony, basic chordal structure. And you can branch out from there because the basics can lead you into all kinds of complexities as you grow and as you build. But it's the basic understanding that you need to get a hold of, because as you build upon it, no matter what the theoretician calls it, that, if you have a basic understanding of that's that interval with that interval and that interval at that step, and what those intervals are combined, that is going to be much more important to you than some theoretical view of what that means. And that, I don't want to pick on anybody that's a serious theoretician, but I ran into that and it caused me all kinds of problems because I got lost in it. So let's just talk about the basics. Harmony, the basic first components of harmony. You've got a C. You're starting with the root C, and you've got a fourth, and we've talked about the intervals, so you know that that's a fourth. That F on there is going to be a fourth. So what do you call that? You call that a fourth. Okay, so you've got the root and whatever interval you've chosen as a basic two-part harmony, so that'll be a fourth. So you've got the root, and you've got the third interval. What are you going to call that? You're going to call that a third. Well, you've got the root, and you've got a minor third. What are you going to call that? A minor third harmony. Okay, so any of those intervals combined with your root, try to keep it that simple in your mind. If you want to get all theoretical, I don't care. But, if you can grab a hold of that basic concept, and then you can build upon that. If you really want to get in depth on theory, and that's great. But, as long as you can understand that basic concept and it's that simple for you as a building block. Next, we want to talk about basic chords. So basic chords are what? You've got 2-note harmonies. Now you're going to go maybe 3 notes. So what are you going to call that? A triad. So basic triads are going to be 3 notes. Triad, 3, right? Okay, so it's that simple. Keep it that simple. So let's talk about some basic triads. Basic triad would be a major triad, which would be a root, a major third, and a fifth. You've just built a major triad. That is the fundamental foundation of a major chord. It's that simple. Don't make it any more complicated than that. Okay, so next you would want a minor triad. So you've got the minor harmony that's 3 notes. You start with the root to C, you've got a minor third, and you've got the fifth. Now you've just created a minor chord, a minor triad. It's the same thing. It's the basic 3-note building block for a chord if it starts getting large, which would basically just mean multiples of the notes we just talked about. Okay, so that's the minor triad. The next would be augmented triad. So you've got this harmony that's 3 notes, and you'd have the root that is C, then you're going to have the third, which is E, and then you're going to have the minor sixth. Okay, now that is an augmented triad. And you've just built yourself an augmented triad. It's that simple. And then next we're going to have a diminished triad, which is going to be root, and it's going to be minor third, and it's going to be minor fifth. Now you've just built yourself a diminished triad. And those chordal structures from the basic 3-note harmonies that they're constructed from. And a sus. So you have the root, you have the fourth, and you have the fifth interval that are making a sus triad. So triads are the basic foundation and building blocks to build more complex chordal structures. But with that understanding of those basic things, that you've basically addressed that. One thing I want to address is sometimes when you go, let's say you're talking about the minor triad. So you're talking about root C, a minor third, and a fifth, right? Well, sometimes they'll call that a flat third instead of a minor third. So get that in your head that if you hear a flat third or a flat second or a flat fifth or a flat sixth, they might be just talking about a minor of that. Like if you're going to the sixth and they say a flat sixth and you're expecting to hear a minor sixth, they may be referring to the same thing. So you've just got a grip on and understand the basic triads, chordal structures, 3-tone basic chordal structures to build more complex structures on. Now, there's all kinds of inversions of that. I'm not getting to get into that, but you once you understand that, I do just suggest you look them up so you can understand what inversions of that are. It's just different ways of putting those same notes together. And it's that simple. Don't make it any more complicated than that. Next, we'll talk about a little bit more complex chords. So we're talking about, let's address a sixth. So you have root, you have a major third, you have a fifth, and a sixth. Now that's a sixth chord, okay? Now how do you make that a minor chord? The only way you're going to make that a minor chord is the same with the same notes except for root, minor third instead of major third, fifth, and sixth. And now you've just created a minor sixth. And it's that simple. Don't get any more complicated than that. Okay, so we're talking about a major seventh chord. A major seventh chord is going to be a root, a third, a fifth interval, and a seventh interval. Now you've just created a major seventh chord. Now how do you make that a minor seventh chord? Is you go to add a minor seventh instead of a seventh, and you add a minor third instead of the third, and you've created yourself a major minor seventh chord. And now let's address the ninth chord. Very simply, as you've got the root, you've got the major third, you've got the flat seventh, and you've got the ninth. Now, in ninth, basically that's going up above your 7 intervals there. So what the ninth works out to is it basically is your second interval. And we'll talk more about that later, because basically when you get up there, that ninth interval is going to be up in here, but you want it down in here because it's the basic structure of it. The second actually works out to actually the ninth interval. So that's the basic structure of the ninth. So now one chord that's very popular is a dominant seventh. So what is the dominant seventh structure? You've got the root, you've got the third, you've got the fifth, and you've got the flat seventh. And that's a dominant seventh chord. It's that simple. Those are some of the most basic chords that you'll run across to build larger complex structures. But if you understand those basic triads and you understand those basic chords, that you've got a really good understanding of the chordal structure. And if you just practice those, it's really going to give you an understanding of those intervals and what's involved in them. There's all kinds of ways you can invert them and play the notes that you were adding to up here, down here, and all kinds of, there's lots of different things you can do with that. Let's not get into, you want to keep your theory basic. What you can do with theory, that can get very complex. I'm trying to point that out directly. The other chord that you really might come across is a half diminished chord, and that is going to be root, flat third, flat fifth, flat seventh, and a flat sixth. And you have a half diminished chord. And it's that simple. So, with those chords and those structures, the understanding of building the chords is that, you've got a pretty good understanding right now if you understand that. And you build those chords in MuseScore to see how they're put together and where those intervals go. But you should have a pretty good understanding of theoretically what's happening there. You've got an understanding of what a major chord, the major components of it, the minor chord, an augmented chord, a diminished, a sus, basic sixth chords, basic minor sixth, basic major seventh chords, basic major minor seventh chords, basic ninth chords. A minor ninth chord is going to be the same thing with a minor third. Dominant seventh chords that are very much in use, and a half diminished chord. And you've got, some basic building blocks, the basic building blocks for building most chords. I've got 54 chords here, and most of these chords are based upon those structures, to where I might have like a major or a minor triad that I start adding something to. You know, that major or minor triad, I just added a sixth to, and it became a sixth. Now, for some reason, I might add some other note to it. Now, some of that theory can get very complex, but basically, I'm trying to get you to look at it to where you're going to see anything you add into those basic structures is going to be consonant or dissonant to you, you know, because theoretically it might not work, you know, but that doesn't mean that it ain't going to get in the song. I learned that a long time ago. So, and it definitely isn't going to mean you might not use it. So that's the basic chordal structures, and you understand the building blocks. Now you understand the basic triads. You understand the basic harmonies, what they are. You understand a few complex chords and what happened there. I mean, you know, let's talk about that for just a second. The sixth chord, what happened there? You had a major triad that was the root, the third, and the fifth that you added a sixth to. It became a major sixth. And when you made that a minor sixth, all you did is take that major third and drop it down to a minor third. And you understand what happened there, how it became major or minor, that chordal structure. And it's that simple. You know, things like the ninth chord is the same way. What did you have to build that? You had the root, you had the major third, you had the ninth, which works out to the second. We'll get into that later. And the actual flat seventh. And, you know, that's the basic structure of that chord. And those are your basic chords for the most part that you're going to be dressing. Most of the chords that I put together were basically based on those structures. And some of them veered off a little ways, but it was most of the time when I was trying to understand things and figure things out that it was those basics that I had to go back to build, you know, larger complexities from them. And if you can just get a hold of that idea that those are the basic structures of harmony, triads, and, you know, and getting into some more complex chords and what's happening there. You know, you're taking major or minor chords and you're adding to them. You're taking sus chords and you're adding sus triads, major triads, minor triads, augmented chords or triads, and diminished triads, and you're adding things to them to create other, you know, to create more complex chordal structures. Just about all of them like that are. The half diminished is an exception there, and so is the ninth. You know, the half diminished and the ninth are a very serious exception to that rule, because, you know, you've seen how that they're put together, that they don't, some of those components just aren't in there. So those are an exception to the rule. But those are the things you want to get a hold of. And if you can get a hold of those basic understandings, now you understand the building blocks of harmonies, you understand the building blocks of chordal structures, you understand basic harmonies, you understand basic chords as triads, and you understand more complex chords, complex chordal structures normally are going to be built from triads or simple harmonies, simple 3-note harmonies that you're going to build from to construct more complex chordal structures. So I hope that I put that in a way that made that very simple, so that actual theoretical understanding of what's happening there is that simple. It's not any more complex than that. Sometimes you are going to run into chords and chordal structures that are going to be complex, and they're really not going to relate to that stuff. But if you break those chords down, you will find out that they more than likely do relate to two things. They're going to relate to basic harmonies being put together and or triads and basic chordal structures. So try to look at any complex chords that you come across or complex structures as, you know, complexities and basic harmonies built up, or basic triads built up, and with maybe a couple added notes or added harmonies to them. And keep it that simple in your mind when you're looking at that. And, you know, after you get a good grip on that and you understand that well, I suggest you just kind of dig around on chords and chordal structures, but don't get yourself wrapped up in the theory too much, because you can just get lost in the theory when it's the basics that you're going to more than likely fall back on to actually build larger complexities and larger structures, or understand what's going on in music or your production. So I hope that was very simple and understandable, And peace, hope, love.